My name is Tamsin Vale, 15 years old. When people ask when it went wrong, I never say the day Dad's startup sold for 8 figures. I say the day I found Colton pouring Red Bull into his cereal because he'd seen Dad do it and assumed breakfast was supposed to fizz. I was 12. The can hissed. The flakes turned the color of surrender. I took the can away, handed him milk, and told myself it was an experiment, not a pattern. It was a pattern. Before money, our life had edges. Mom's bento boxes with panda rice, Dad's hoarse soccer coach voice yelling for Bethany, my science fair volcano that always erupted on cue because Dad stayed up with me to make sure it did. After money, everything softened and slid. Bento boxes turned into $20 bills. Bedtime story became, go watch Netflix. Dinner was a DoorDash gift card taped to the fridge like a mercy. The day I knew they had waved the white flag was a Tuesday, quiet in the way bad weather is quiet. I came home and stopped in the doorway of our kitchen. Colton, 8 years old, safety goggles slid down his nose, stood in the middle of plastic sheeting, carefully measuring water and sugar into beakers he'd stolen from my abandoned chem kit. The room looked like a set decorator's idea of moral decay, blue crystals drying on racks, a YouTube tutorial paused on a frame of Breaking Bad. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked, even though I already knew. He didn't look up. "Being Walter White," he said, swiping a drop with a gloved finger. "Mom said I could do whatever makes me happy." "Where is Mom?" "Retreat," he frowned. "Wine or meditation, I forget which." "Dad?" "Garage." He pointed vaguely, the way you point at weather. "Dubai or Denver." I scanned the kitchen, the fake lab, my third-grader brother calibrating a pretend felony, and felt something inside me give, not a snap, not even a break, just this soft, terrible recognition. "You want help?" I heard myself say. His eyes blew wide. "Really?" "Sure," I said, because if no one was going to be an adult, I could at least be a chemist. But we're making it blue. We spent 3 hours perfecting our candy empire. Bethany came home mid-heist, probably, tossed her stolen lip gloss onto the counter, and fell into our production line without asking questions. We wore dish-glove hazmat suits, set up quality control, and argued about the exact hue of morally compromised blue. That's when Dad walked in. Not from Denver or Dubai, but from the garage, where his Tesla was a conference room and the world existed in 30-minute blocks. He surveyed the plastic sheeting, the beakers, his 3 children, dressed like raccoons, caught in a pharmacy, and blinked. "Is that," he started. "Rock candy," I said. "Colton's science project." Dad nodded slowly, like the room was a pitch deck and he'd decided not to invest. "Cool," he said. "Save me some." He grabbed a beer and went upstairs. That was the moment. Not the money, not the move, not any of the shiny new nouns. Just that one word. Cool. The way he stepped over the plastic, over us, and went back to wherever he lived now. But vacuums hate being empty. What filled ours was Rex. Not a drug dealer, though that would have been less creative. A 20-something with a murdered-out Camaro who ran a procurement service for rich kids with holes in their days. He noticed Bethany's shoplifting the way talent scouts notice a 90-mile-an-hour fastball. He taught her security tags, camera blind spots, schedules. He texted after midnight. He used words like opportunity and score and we. I only found out when I walked in on Bethany at 2 a.m., stuffing a duffel bag with black clothes. "Where are you going?" I asked, blocking the door with the kind of authority you borrow when you're 15 and terrified. "Rex says there's an empty house in Westwood," she said. "Families in Europe. We can clean it out tonight." "You're 13. She didn't blink. "And you helped Colton cook fake meth." "That's different." "Is it, though?" She had a point. In a house where parents had abdicated, the older sister could lecture, or she could be useful. But something about Rex set off every alarm in my body. Luca, my boyfriend, had met him once at a friend's party and said, "He looks at people like puzzles he can sell." Camilla, Luca's ex, had actually ridden in that Camaro and warned me. He keeps a knife in the console. I pretended I didn't care what Camilla knew. I did. "I'm coming with you," I said. "Tammy, no. It's that or I wake Dad and tell him everything." She snorted. "He won't care." "Maybe not," I said, "but he'll cancel your cards to protect his liability." She exhaled, annoyed, because I was right. 20 minutes later, we were in Rex's Camaro, engine purring like a threat, city smeared in neon. He glanced at me in the rear view the way you look at a seat you didn't order. "Who's the extra?" he asked. My sister, Bethany said. She can carry. He didn't like it, but greed is a lax gatekeeper. We slid through Westwood's sleeping streets and pulled up to a house with more glass than privacy. Rex had the code. The front door sighed open into a foyer that made silence feel expensive. Somewhere in that cavern, a thermostat hummed. See, he said, already swaggering. Empty. Down the hall, a study glowed low. Behind glass, a wall of guns. Rex, I whispered, my heartbeat a strobe. You said they were in Europe. They are, he said, jimming the cabinet with a practiced flick. He lifted something that looked like an assault rifle, the way some people lift wine. But their son isn't. He's upstairs. Xanax. Rich kid problems. Bethany flinched. There's someone in the house? Relax, he said, not relaxing. He won't wake up if a bomb goes off. But footsteps began anyway, upstairs, slow, then faster. Back door, Rex hissed, clamping his hand around Bethany's wrist. Let go, I said, taking her other arm. Shut up, kid. The shadow reached the bottom of the stairs. Bethany cried out when Rex yanked her hard, and that's when my 15-year-old brain did the only math it could. 3 people, 1 door, 1 chance. I screamed, not fear, not theater. Help us, please, with the kind of volume that tells a house it knows your name. The person on the stairs ran. Rex dropped Bethany and bolted for the kitchen. We ran the opposite way, out the front, into the cold night, where streetlights made 3 teenage shadows look braver than we felt. 6 blocks later, we collapsed in a fluorescent diner, hands wrapped around coffee we couldn't drink, trying not to shake. Bethany cried the kind of crying that doesn't need an audience. I'm sorry, she kept saying. I didn't know. It's okay, I said, which wasn't true but was necessary. At 6 a.m., my phone rang. Colton. Tammy, he said, voice high and wrong. I need you to come home. What happened? I think Mom's dead. The world tilted. What? She's on the bathroom floor and won't wake up, and there are bottles everywhere, and... Call 911, I said, already standing. We're on our way. The drive home felt like the kind of nightmare where the road keeps folding back on itself. Bethany sat beside me in borrowed diner light, mascara sliced down her cheeks, hands clenched in her hoodie pocket like she was trying to hold the night shut. Dawn turned everything the color of old paper. When we hit our street, there was an ambulance already pulsing in the driveway, the lights too bright for morning, too loud for hope. Colton stood on the curb in dinosaur pajamas, barefoot on the cold concrete, trying not to cry, and failing. She won't wake up, he said as soon as I opened the door. I called 911 like you said. They're with her. We ran inside. The bathroom smelled like citrus cleaner fighting a losing war with wine. Mom was on the tile, head turned to the side, hair stuck to her cheek. Empty amber bottles lay on their sides like knocked-over soldiers. A white prescription vial rolled at the baseboard. The label said Zolpidem, Ambien, her name perfectly printed, everything official. Pulse is thready, but there, an EMT said, not looking at me, looking at time. Let's move. They lifted her, efficient and gentle. Mom's wrist flopped in the air before the blanket swallowed it, and something inside me made the smallest sound it could make without breaking. Which hospital? I asked. Cedar Hills, the EMT said, then was gone. Dad was not in Dubai or Denver. He was in our garage, sitting in the Tesla like it was a lifeboat. He stumbled out when he saw the lights, phone to his ear, eyes already calculating. He smelled like stale coffee and the end of a red eye. What happened? He asked, as if there were an answer that would make sense. Ambien and wine, I said. A lot of both. He inhaled like the air had to be measured, then nodded once. I'll meet them there. He looked at us, at the 3 kids he'd left with a gift card and a calendar, and said the thing he says when he wants a problem to be a meeting. It's going to be okay. We followed the ambulance in 2 cars, Dad in the Tesla, me in Bethany's panic with Colton strapped in tight. Luca called twice. I declined both times because I didn't have language yet for anything except drive, turn, park, don't scream. At the hospital, the waiting room televisions were already playing the soft news loop, people on couches pretending their lives weren't folding. A nurse took Dad back. Security told us to sit. Colton leaned into me, small and hot, the way he used to when thunder practiced overhead. Bethany shook so hard her ponytail trembled. She's not going to die, I said, a sentence you can only say when you have no data. An hour later, a doctor with careful eyes called us into a small consult room with a too-clean table and a watercolor of a sailboat going nowhere. She's stable, he said, and the world put one hand back on the railing. We're calling it an accidental overdose. Ambien can be disorienting, especially combined with alcohol. Accidental, Dad repeated, as if trying the word on. So, she can come home after arrest? The doctor's eyes moved to a place over Dad's shoulder where doctors go when they have to tell you something you already know. I'd recommend a program, he said. 30 days at minimum. Structured, safe. Dad exhaled. A wellness facility, he countered, like this was a branding decision. Something discreet. She needs rest. Rehab, the doctor said without changing his volume. She needs rehab. Dad worked his jaw. We will find a place, he said to us, which wasn't what the doctor had asked. I'll handle it. I wanted to ask if he was going to handle breakfast too, and school pickups, and the fact that last night his daughter almost robbed a house because she needed someone to tell her no. Instead, I nodded because nodding was free. They wouldn't let us see Mom yet. Colton asked if she was asleep, and I said yes, because it was the closest truth. In the parking lot, Dad unlocked the Tesla and turned to us with his CEO face. I'm arranging a facility, he said. A good one. She'll get help. Rehab, I said, testing the word out loud like it might break our teeth. Exhaustion treatment, he corrected. Language matters. Not as much as oxygen, I said before I could fold the words back in. He looked at me like I'd just spoken a dialect he almost recognized. Go home, he said. I'll be there later. He wasn't. Not until 6 hours later, when the house had returned to its pretense and the sun did the thing it always does, and Colton had fallen asleep on the couch, hugging a pillow like it might leave too. Dad walked in with hospital bracelets still on his wrist, and a gait that looked like he'd forgotten how to land. She's admitted, he said. We found a place. Ridgecrest Recovery and Wellness. The word wellness went down like dry bread. Not rehab? Bethany asked, voice rough. Terminology varies, Dad said, which wasn't an answer. She'll start tomorrow. He pressed his fingers to his eyes, then looked at us the way you look at strangers you are legally responsible for. He stopped. I should have been paying attention, he said instead. This is on me. It was something, not enough, but something. The drive home from the hospital had felt like gravity was optional. The drive back to the kitchen felt like walking into a room where the lights had learned how to lie. I opened cabinets and found nothing you could cook a life with. The fridge hummed with expensive beverages. I'm hungry, Colton said from the living room, small and apologetic like hunger was a misbehavior. Me too, Bethany whispered. So I cooked. Not a scroll and tap dinner. Not takeout that tasted like someone else's house. Spaghetti with meat sauce, garlic bread, a salad I made aggressively, like it would prove something. The sauce simmered, and the kitchen began to smell like a door opening. We sat at the dining table for the first time in months and pretended we were not afraid. Colton twirled noodles and talked about a volcano project like he hadn't almost lost a mother that morning. Bethany kept her eyes on her plate and said thanks and meant it. I ate like it was a job. Dad came back later, after another meeting, and found us asleep on the couch with the TV, asking us if we were still watching. He stood there long enough to be a statue, then covered Colton with a blanket and looked at me, eyes tired, mouth uncertain, like he'd walked into the wrong house and wanted to be in the right one. The next morning, there was breakfast on the table. Not money for breakfast. Actual eggs, bacon, toast scorched at the edges. Dad held a spatula like a white flag. I talked to your mom, he said, not quite meeting our eyes. She needs time to get better. How long? Colton asked. I don't know. Is she coming back? I don't know, he said again, and it hurt less than a lie. He set down the spatula like a surrender and opened his laptop at the kitchen table, not behind the office door. He stayed where we could see him. It was awkward, like borrowing someone else's clothes and trying to pretend they fit. He asked what time we got home. He asked if Colton wanted help with fractions. He didn't know where the Forks lived. For 3 days, we invented a rhythm. Dad worked within arm's reach. I walked Colton to school. Bethany sat at the counter and did homework like the word meant anything. We pretended nothing was broken while carefully not touching the sharp parts. On the 4th morning, there was a knock at the door. 2 detectives stood on the porch, their politeness the kind you use with people who don't know whether they're drowning. Good morning, one said. We're following up on a break-in in Westwood. Security footage shows 2 teens who look like you, he added, glancing at me and Bethany. Do you know anything about that? Dad's face went through 17 emotions in 3 seconds, then landed on attorney-client privilege. I'd like to speak with my lawyer, he said. Of course, the detective replied. We'll wait. Dad's lawyer arrived like a conjuring trick. There was hushed conversation in the foyer, papers, the delicate clink of expensive damage control. When they were done, the detectives left with a promise to be in touch and a look that said they already were. Dad sat across from us and folded his hands like a, finally, parent. "Tell me everything," he said. "Don't leave anything out." So we did. When we finished, he was very quiet. Then he nodded, once, like a verdict. "Okay," he said. "This is on me, not you." It didn't erase the night, or the bathroom tiles, or the way Rex's hand had closed around Bethany's wrist. But it was the first true sentence we'd heard in a long time. And sometimes a single true sentence is enough to keep the day from collapsing. By the time the detectives left, the house felt too still, the kind of quiet that hums in your teeth. Dad stood by the window for a long time, one hand pressed to the glass, watching the empty street like it might apologize. Then he turned, his voice calm in a way that felt unnatural. "You're not in trouble," he said. "My lawyer will handle it." That word, handle, was one of his favorites. It meant bury, buy off, or make disappear. He took off his wedding ring, rolled it between his fingers, and said, "This happened because I wasn't paying attention. Because your mother and I—" He stopped. The silence finished the sentence for him. Bethany whispered, "We still did it." "You're 13, he said, softer now. "You got manipulated by someone who should be in jail, which, if my lawyer does his job, he will be." "What about the footage?" I asked. "Handled." "How?" "The homeowner's a client," he said simply. "We reached an understanding." I didn't ask what kind. I already knew. Money had become his language long before love stopped being one. He ran a hand through his hair. "Things are going to change," he said, "starting now." It was a promise and a threat. The next morning, there was a new calendar taped to the fridge, color-coded, laminated, every hour labeled, chores, tutoring, family dinners, screen-free time. A woman with the posture of a retired soldier arrived at 8 a.m., sharp. "I'm Mrs. Petrova," she said, her accent as sharp as her bun. "Your father hired me to help bring structure." "Structure?" Bethany muttered. "Like prison?" "Structure brings freedom," Petrova said cheerfully. "You will thank me later." Colton actually liked her, probably because she made pancakes shaped like rockets. The rest of us weren't sure what to do with someone who said things like, "No screens, only sunlight." Dad called it Family 2.0. He cooked dinners at 6 o'clock sharp, the smell of burnt meatloaf filling the air while he read articles about positive reinforcement. He stopped disappearing into his office and started working at the kitchen table, laptop glowing like a second sun. Mom's wellness facility sent updates every week. Progressing, committed, responding well to treatment. None of the emails used the word rehab. The house became orderly, almost militarized. Schedules replaced conversation. It was supposed to make things better, but it just made the silence louder. "This is worse than before," Bethany said one night, staring at her chore chart. "At least when they didn't care, they didn't pretend." I wanted to argue, but she was right. Dad was managing us like assets, not raising us. Still, Colton thrived. He liked knowing what time breakfast would happen, what day he had Little League. He'd come home grinning, dirt on his knees, showing off a trophy the size of his forearm. When he handed it to Dad, Dad looked startled, like he'd forgotten that pride had a physical shape. "Good job, buddy," he said awkwardly. I'm proud of you." It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Then Mom came home. She looked smaller, sharper, like someone had turned up the contrast on her life. Her voice was steady when she called the family meeting. "I'm an alcoholic," she said simply, "and a pill addict, and probably addicted to pretending everything was fine." Colton frowned. "What's an alcoholic?" "It means I can't drink anymore," she said gently. "Ever." Dad shifted in his seat. "Maybe don't—" "No," she interrupted. "They deserve the truth." She looked at us. "I went away to learn how to stop lying to myself." "For how long?" Bethany asked. "Forever, hopefully." It was the first time I'd heard Mom use that word like a destination instead of a curse. She turned to Dad. "We need a real plan. Not schedules, not nannies, presents, honesty, even when it's ugly." Dad hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." Colton slid off his chair and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Can we be normal now?" he asked. Mom kissed his hair. "We can try." Trying, it turned out, was exhausting. Dinner became mandatory. Family game nights were non-negotiable. Weekends were for reconnection activities. The first one was a hike in Griffith Park. Bethany lasted 20 minutes before she stopped in the middle of the trail, sweat glistening on her forehead. "This is stupid," she announced. "We're all pretending. You keep checking your phone, Dad. Mom's pretending she likes nature. Colton's pretending this isn't boring. And Tammy," she pointed at me, "you're pretending you don't hate all of us right now." I blinked. That's a lot of pretending. She crossed her arms. "Let's just be honest. This whole perfect family thing isn't us. We're the family where Mom passed out in the bathroom and Dad lived in the garage. Where Colton made fake meth and I almost robbed a house and Tammy had to raise us. That's who we are." "That's who we were," Dad said quietly. "But it's still us," she insisted. "You can't fix it by pretending it never happened." We all stood there, other hikers giving us a wide berth like dysfunction was contagious. "So what do you want to do instead?" Dad asked finally. Bethany shrugged. "Something that actually feels real." An hour later, we ended up in an arcade in Hollywood. Colton spotted it from the car. Neon lights, music blasting through the doors. Dad didn't even argue. He just pulled over. Inside, the noise was chaos. Kids shouting, machines beeping, lights flashing like a heartbeat. Colton vanished toward the games. Bethany found a dance machine and immediately started a competition with strangers. And Mom and Dad stood there looking completely lost. "When did arcades get so complicated?" Mom asked. "Around 1995, I said. Then Dad saw an old Street Fighter cabinet in the corner. He grinned, really grinned, for the first time in months. "I used to be good at this," he said. "Prove it," Bethany challenged. He did. Within minutes, he was absolutely annihilating anyone who played him. A crowd gathered. Kids cheered. For a moment, the man who'd spent years behind glass conference doors looked alive again. "Your dad's kind of cool," a kid said to me. "Yeah," I said, surprised to realize it was true. Mom found a photo booth and dragged all of us in. The pictures were awful. Half blinks, bad lighting, crooked smiles. But they were real. She printed them and pinned them to the fridge when we got home, right next to the old DoorDash gift cards. I told her we should throw those out. "No," she said. "They're a reminder." "Of what?" "Of what happens when we stop trying." It wasn't a fairy tale fix. Mom still went to meetings every morning. Dad still slipped into work mode when things got too emotional. Bethany still had Rex's number in her phone, even if she swore she'd never use it. And I still woke up some nights half convinced that the whole fragile thing would collapse again. But we were trying. For the first time in years, that felt like enough. Trying, as it turned out, was a marathon made of small, awkward steps. No dramatic music, no single turning point. Just mornings that didn't fall apart, dinners that actually happened, and people who didn't walk away. The kitchen became our headquarters. We ate at the same table that had once been covered in unopened mail and takeout containers. Dad still burned things, but he laughed when he did. Mom drank sparkling water like it was a lifeline. Colton drew comics while pretending to do homework. Bethany rolled her eyes at everything but stayed anyway. And me? I watched, waiting for the floor to give out again. It didn't, not yet. The first real crack came with school. Turns out when your parents stop parenting for 2 years, your GPA takes it personally. I was failing 2 classes. Bethany was failing 3. Even Colton, the golden child, had slipped to B's. Dad stared at the report cards like they were betrayal letters. "This is unacceptable." "Is it?" I asked quietly. "Because you didn't even know what grade I was in 6 months ago." His mouth opened, then closed. "That was then," he said finally. "And this is the result of then. We fix it." Mom stepped in before I could answer. "He's right about one thing," she said. "This is on us, so we fix it together." Fixing it meant tutors, late nights, and tears over algebra. It meant Dad reading chapters aloud so Colton could follow along. It meant Mom proofreading essays at midnight, sipping Diet Coke instead of Chardonnay. It wasn't glamorous. It was human. 3 months later, Rex got arrested. Not for the Westwood break-in. Dad's lawyer had made that go away, but for a string of similar burglaries. Bethany had to testify. We all went to court with her. She sat in the witness box, voice trembling but steady, while Rex glared from the defense table. He looked smaller in orange. When it was over, she walked out into the sunlight and said quietly, "He was 23. I was 13. I thought I was special." "You were," Mom said, taking her hand. "Just not in the way he told you." That night, Bethany deleted Rex's number in front of all of us. Dad said nothing, but he reached out and squeezed her shoulder like a silent applause. By spring, our house looked less like a museum and more like a home. There were shoes by the door again, backpacks dumped by the couch, and drawings taped crookedly to the fridge. Still, gossip traveled faster than healing. At school, kids whispered, "I heard your mom overdosed." I heard your sister got arrested. I heard your dad lost everything. Only 2 out of 3 were true, but truth didn't matter in high school. Bethany handled it better than I did. When people asked, she just shrugged. Yeah, I messed up. I'm in therapy now. Her brutal honesty short-circuited gossip better than any denial could. I envied that about her, the way she owned her scars before anyone else could weaponize them. Mom started working again. Not law, not money. She took a job at a nonprofit helping people in recovery. Dad called it giving back. Mom called it staying sane. Dad's company offered him a new position, West Coast director. 8 figures, bonuses, prestige. The old him would have said yes before they finished the sentence. This time he hesitated. I have to take it, he said one night at dinner. No, you don't, Mom said. It's 8 figures, Grace. We have money. Not forever. Then you take it, she said. And we go back to how we were. Your choice. They argued for weeks, not behind closed doors, but right there at dinner, where we could all hear the truth. It was uncomfortable. It was also the most honest thing they'd done in years. Finally, Dad made a decision. He took the job, but on his terms. 3 days in the office, 2 from home. No travel during family events. Less money, but more presence. Compromise, he said, like he'd just discovered the word. Mom smiled tiredly. Congratulations, you're human. The holidays came around like a test we hadn't studied for. Last year, Christmas meant Venmo transfers and a polite buy what you want. This year, there were actual presents under an actual tree. Bethany stared at the boxes like they might bite. This is weird. Good weird or bad weird? Mom asked. Just weird. Colton got a real chemistry set. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Bethany got concert tickets. Mom handed me a wrapped guitar. I thought you said we couldn't afford music lessons, I said. Lessons? No, but we can afford a start, she said. Dad gave Mom a necklace with 4 birthstones, 1 for each of us and 1 for her. For when you forget, he said. Forget what? That you're not alone. She cried. We all pretended not to notice. That night, we watched old Christmas movies until Colton fell asleep on the couch. Dad carried him to bed, humming a tune I hadn't heard in years. Mom caught my eye over the flickering TV. We're messy, she said softly, but we're still here. Spring thawed more than the weather. Mom got her 1-year sobriety chip. We didn't throw a party, just a quiet dinner and a small cake. It's weird celebrating something that should have been normal, she admitted. Then let's celebrate weird, Dad said. We're good at it. He was right. We were a family stitched together with the threads of 1,000 small returns. Imperfect, frayed, but holding. The night I realized we were really different was the night I caught Dad reading to Colton. It was Harry Potter. Terrible accents and all. Colton laughed so hard he snorted. Dad looked up, startled, like laughter was a language he'd forgotten. He met my eyes, a little embarrassed, and said, He made me do all the voices. It's awful, Colton added proudly, but in a good way. That's when it hit me. Love didn't look like grand gestures or perfect schedules. Sometimes it was just a grown man doing bad British impressions because his son asked him to. When summer came, the rhythm of normal started to feel real, not perfect, just real. And maybe that was enough. Because the truth about broken families is this. You don't rebuild them in one sweeping act of forgiveness. You rebuild them one burnt dinner, one awkward laugh, one bedtime story at a time. And for the first time, it felt like we might actually make it. By the time summer rolled in, we had something that looked suspiciously like peace. Not the kind you brag about on holiday cards, but the fragile, lived-in kind that comes from surviving your own history. We still fought, of course. Colton refused sunscreen. Bethany slammed doors like punctuation. Dad worked too late, and Mom still flinched when she passed a wine aisle. But we were orbiting each other again. Not perfectly, but willingly. One night, I found Mom sitting on the porch steps after dinner, staring at the sky. Her coffee mug steamed in her hands. Black coffee, always now. You okay? I asked. She nodded, then laughed quietly. I used to sit here every night with a glass of wine and think I was relaxing. Turns out I was disappearing. I sat beside her. You came back. Because you made me, she said. Because you all did. She glanced at the living room window where Dad and Colton were setting up another round of Street Fighter. He's terrible at that game, she whispered. He thinks he's still in college, I said. Her smile softened. It's good he still tries. That was our house now. Small attempts stitched into something bigger. School started again in the fall, and reality rushed back in like a cold tide. Everyone at my private school already knew our story. The overdose, the police, the rehab that wasn't. It should have broken me. But by then, I was done performing. When someone whispered, "Is it true your mom OD'd?" I looked them straight in the eye and said, "Yeah, she got help. She's better now." The truth was armor. No one knew how to gossip about honesty. Bethany, meanwhile, was rebuilding herself in public. She joined the volleyball team, went to therapy, even started dating a boy named Aaron who was polite, awkward, and clearly terrified of Dad. "After Rex," Dad said, arms folded, "assessing Aaron like a business risk? I'll have him checked." "Dad, that's stalking," Bethany groaned. "Parenting," he corrected, though he backed off after Mom glared. Aaron survived dinner. Colton interrogated him about video games. I asked him about music, and Mom asked him to pass the salad like a final exam. He passed, barely. Later that night, Bethany came into my room, flopped onto my bed, and said, "I think I actually like him." "You deserve to," I said. For a long time, she didn't. None of us did. In October, Mom hit her 18-month sobriety milestone. Dad brought home a cake that said, 627 days of awesome. The bakery had apparently asked if it was a joke. Dad just said, "We're weird people," and paid anyway. We ate the whole cake that night. "I love you guys," Mom said through a mouthful of frosting. "We love you too," Colton said, already licking the icing off his plate. It was silly, imperfect, and a little too sweet, which was probably the point. Then February happened. The school caught me smoking weed behind the gym. The old version of my parents would have ignored it, or worse, spun it into a PR problem. Family 2.0 staged an intervention. "It's just weed," I protested. "Half the school does it." "That's what I said about wine," Mom replied evenly. "I'm not you." "No," she said gently. "But you're trying to quiet something the same way I did. So what are you trying not to feel?" I hated that question because it was good. They waited. Dad's silence wasn't angry. It was patient. Finally, I said, "I don't know how to be normal. Everyone at school treats me like I'm responsible for everyone else. The strong one, the good one. But I'm 15. I want to be stupid sometimes." Mom blinked back tears. Dad leaned forward. "You shouldn't have had to be the adult," he said. "That was our job." "But someone had to." Mom reached across the table. "Not anymore." "So I can smoke weed?" I asked hopefully. "Absolutely not," they said in unison. We all laughed, and for once it didn't feel like a war. When spring came, Mom was invited to speak at her old treatment center's annual fundraiser. She tried to refuse. "It's not just my story," she said. "It's all of ours." Bethany shrugged. "We're already the family everyone gossips about. Might as well own it." So she spoke. We sat in the front row while she stood at a podium under 2 bright lights and told a room full of strangers the truth. About the bathroom floor, the wine, the pills, the children who raised themselves, the husband who came back too late but still came back. "We're not perfect," she said at the end. "We're not even close, but we're trying, every single day." The applause was slow at first, then thunderous. Afterward, a woman approached her in tears. "Your family gives me hope," she said. Colton grinned. "We give us hope too." Senior year came faster than I expected. The guidance counselor asked me what I wanted to write my college essay about. "My family," I said. She smiled politely, like it was a cliché. Maybe something more academic, but I wrote it anyway. I wrote about Red Bull and fake meth, about money and silence, about the day I found my brother tied to a tree, made of our parents' absence. I wrote about my mom's fall and my dad's guilt, and the 1,000 tiny ways we stitched ourselves back together. It wasn't pretty, but it was real. When Mom read it, she cried. When Dad read it, he said, "You left out that I can cook now." "Barely," I said. He grinned. "Still counts." I got into a good school. Not Ivy League, but close enough that it impressed the grandparents who still thought the incident was a phase. The night before I left, we had one last family dinner. Colton made spaghetti, Bethany baked a lopsided cake, Dad burned the garlic bread, and Mom poured sparkling cider like champagne. Dad raised his glass. "To the weirdest, most dysfunctional, absolutely perfect family I know." "We're not perfect," Bethany said automatically. "Perfect for us," he corrected. We clinked glasses, even Colton, with his chocolate milk. And in that moment, I realized something simple and enormous. Family isn't who gets it right. It's who keeps showing up after they've gotten it wrong. That's what they'd done. That's what we all did. We came back. And for us, that was everything.